Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm 23 and female, and I was at the gym just doing cardio on a treadmill. It was pretty empty, and not very many people there on a Thursday at noon. I always use the treadmills in front of the mirrors so that I can pay attention to my surroundings like a safe young woman. I was on the treadmill 2 away from the end, and all of them were empty, save one at the opposite end of where I was. And then this man gets on the treadmill right next to me, which is weird, but okay. I have my headphones in, and I am watching Criminal Minds, and every so often, I look up at the mirrors just to check my surroundings, and every time that I look up, this man is staring at me. Around 37 minutes of my 45-minute planned cardio, he drops his phone of the side of his treadmill closest to me. I was watching in the mirror, and he basically threw it down next to me. He then gets off the treadmill, picks up his phone, and then taps me on the shoulder. Now, I never took out my headphones, so I couldn't really hear what he was saying. He introduced himself, I never caught his name, and then he asked for my name, and I gave him a fake one. He then said something else, but I couldn't hear him because Derek Morgan got in a shootout. I just nodded and I returned to my show, clearly uninterested in whatever he had to say. At this point, I only had like 5 minutes left, and every time that I looked in the mirror, he was staring at me. I finished my workout and I went to the stretching area that is near the treadmills, still in front of the mirrors. I also took a glance at how long he had been on the treadmill, and it was something like 8 minutes, so not actually long enough to be a real workout, or honestly, even a warm-up. When I moved to the stretching area, he moved to the closest machine and he was still staring at me. Using the mirror, I started counting sets and reps, so in the middle of his set, I got up and left, thinking that this would give me enough time to get to my car and leave before he even noticed that I was gone. I then got to my car, sat down, turned it on, grabbed my seatbelt, and as I was about to click it into place, my passenger side door opened. I yelled, "Don't fucking touch my car!" And I pulled out of the parking spot with both doors wide open. I always back into parking spots because I saw something online from police saying that that was the safest thing to do, and I'm constantly worried about my safety. I drove a mile down the road with my passenger side door open. The next day, I went into the gym to report him, but like I said, I never got his name, and the gym didn't want to look at the cameras with me there and said that once they figured out who it was, that they would talk to him, which really didn't feel like they were doing anything about the situation. So the next week, I canceled my membership, and I've never been back. I was about 13 when this happened, and I lived right on the beach. If you walked about 1.5 kilometers down the beach from my house, you would get to a place where some ocean would be left behind to form some sort of lake. That's where me and a lot of my friends like to hang out. And next to it were 2 dirt roads. Anyways, I had a German Shepherd, and my mother used to kick me out of the house every weekend just for a few hours to go play with the dog, which honestly, I didn't mind. There was a cliff above the beach where you could take a walk to the lake, which was overlooking the beach, but it was covered in forest. And on that day, it was particularly hot, so I chose to spare me and my dog a hot walk and just walk up in the forest. I've done this so many times before, and I wasn't afraid at all. As I was walking, I hear muffled footsteps behind me. My dog was up far ahead of me off leash, and I quickly realized that someone had to be sneaking up behind me because it was near impossible to walk on the dry foliage silently here. So I quickly made a run for it to the exit of the forest, seemingly hearing the footsteps become audible behind me. But no worries, I was out of the lake, and now it was a plain. It was open, and I could already spot a girlfriend of mine there. My dog was already in the water as I went to greet my friend, when we noticed a large man approach us. He must have been close to 2 meters and very slim, and he started talking to us both very kindly. Without knowing any better, we both were polite to him. I, at that time, did not associate the footsteps with this man, but later grew to. He asked a lot about us, where we were from, if anyone was here with us, and so on. And slowly, me and my friend got creeped out. We said our goodbyes, saying that we had to go off to meet our other friends, and we moved to a further distance down the lake. We sat down for a bit and started talking, when my dog started growling. She never used to growl, so this took me by surprise. I looked to see what she was growling at, and lo and behold, the man was standing around 50 meters behind us. Me and my friend had caught on now, and we moved again. And same thing, he was closer now. We were getting freaked out by this. We were being followed and we were all alone. My friend called her mother to come pick us up, though she was at least an hour away. That meant that we were stuck with this creep for an hour or so. The more we moved, the more he came closer. I had leashed my dog by now, as she was going completely rabid at this man, and every time we looked at him, he smiled back, as if we were some sort of close friends. He tailed us for a while until we saw my friend's mother's car arrive at the dirt road. Now, this road was about 200 meters from us, and to get there, we had to cross where the man was standing. But we were terrified. Her mother saw the situation and started running over, which caught the man's attention, which meant that it was our time to dash. I don't think any time in my life that I have run that far that fast, and my dog was running with us as I let her leash go, and when we got to the car, we hastily ran in as the man ran towards us. We stayed in the car while my friend's mother called 112 and waited inside the car. The man was throwing rocks and wailing at us, eventually running off as the police arrived. When the police arrived, they questioned everyone and went looking for the man, but they never found him. I'm still terrified that he's in that forest, waiting for me. I didn't know that day that my friend would be there, and I don't know what would have happened if she wasn't there. I didn't have a phone or any form of contact, and I'm pretty sure that if he would have gotten me, he would have won against my dog. So, to the creepy man who stalked me and tried to catch me and my friend, let's not meet again. I, a 28-year-old female, live in a small, seemingly safe, but not so aesthetically nice subdivision. My partner, 30 and male, works in law enforcement, so I am home alone many nights throughout the week. A few months ago, we adopted a small dog, and since I work remotely, I frequently take our dog on walks throughout the neighborhood for exercise and to help with potty training. We have lived in the neighborhood several years, but normally do not walk the neighborhood much, so we don't know many of our neighbors. And now that I go outside more, I am beginning to meet more of our neighbors. Usually, it's simply a hello in passing, but there are a few neighbors that I now speak to frequently. Everyone seems harmless and friendly, except for this one neighbor who I would refer to as Bob. He's male and approximately 50. One day, I was out walking my dog, and as I passed Bob doing yard work, He stopped me and said what a cute dog I had. He went on to tell me about his time in the military, training bite dogs, and how he was shot and he had remnants behind his heart and etc. And while odd, it seemed friendly enough. What I thought was going to be a 5-minute conversation turned into 19 minutes of me smiling, politely nodding, and then slowly backing away. I'm going to try my best to retell the conversation from memory, but it is hard because Bob was all over the place and his stories were not cohesive at all. While specific, they were very over the top and embellished. Because of this, I won't give too many details for identity reasons. Essentially, he went on to talk about how rich and important he is, along with his family, yet he lives in a mobile home. He said that he's so important that he's had every presidential cabinet on speed dial, that the government has flown him all around the world to do top secret missions, that his family has gotten away with murder and it's been swept under the rug by the government, that even Googling his own name would have the authorities sent to your door for questioning. He said that he used to be in construction and did masonry work for a bunch of celebrities and still hangs out with a lot of them. He said he speaks 7 languages, has a black belt in martial arts, and he also wrestles alligators. He asked me to feel his arm muscles and lifted up his shirt to show me his scars. I could literally go on and on about all the crazy and incoherent things that he said, but at this point, I chalked it up to the ramblings of someone that's not mentally okay. It took a turn when he asked, "Your old man is the cop that lives down the street, right?" I wish that I would have made the mistake of saying yes. As a woman, it can be hard to set boundaries with people like this for fear of confrontation or things escalating. Bob then proceeds to tell me how his son and my partner don't get along. It turns out his son went to high school with my partner and I. He said that he thinks that it has something to do with my partner and his son's baby mama, as Bob put it. For context, my partner and I are high school sweethearts, and we've never really spoke to Bob's son as he was in a different grade than us, and we certainly haven't spoken to him since graduating, and neither of us know the mother of the child. Bob also started making comments on my hair and asked me to take my sunglasses off so that he could see my eyes. He said that I reminded him of an old neighbor that he used to have, and he also said that I reminded him of his daughter. He kept saying that I was a pretty girl and that I reminded him of his daughter. He then proceeds to tell me about all the hot women that he slept with and how he's been to court for over 50 paternity tests and wants to know if he might be my dad. I'm not originally from this area, and my parents have been together 33 years, so there was no way that Bob is my dad. I am sure that I am leaving a bunch of stuff out, but you get the gist. I finally was able to make a break for it, finish my walk, and then headed home. This was about 3 weeks ago, and I no longer go for walks with my dog. I take him to a park or a friend's house. And since then, Bob has come to my house and knocked on my door 3 times, and the last time being today. I obviously did not answer the door all 3 times, but the past 2 times, my partner was not home, and today my partner was sleeping. I am honestly a little freaked out, and I'm not sure what to do. My plan was to keep ignoring him, but I'm afraid that it will escalate, or I will run into him outside, since I have to take my dog out to go to the bathroom. My mom wants my partner to go talk to Bob to see what his problem is or what he wants, but I think that that's a bad idea. So please, let me know what you guys think. Do you think he's just harmless and a bit mentally unstable? Or do I have something to worry about here? Update. I looked him up on our county's clerk of court's website, and wow, He has a very long rap sheet dating all the way back to the 80s to the present day. It started off with traffic infractions, careless driving, running stop signs, but quickly escalated to possession and dealing with meth and cocaine. He had several charges for that. He also had charges for soliciting prostitution, 2 charges of kidnapping, and tons of battery charges, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, grand theft of firearms, burglary with a firearm, domestic violence, violation of a protection order. And that is all I saw before I had to stop. I even thought that maybe I was looking at the wrong person, but I confirmed the full name and the date of birth. I'm going to do some more digging. This is a story that I heard from my friend Aiko. It happened back when she was single, living in an apartment without any fancy security system or any automatic locks. Just a typical building where if someone wanted to pay her a visit, they could walk right up to her door without much trouble. One night, a little after midnight, Aiko was winding down, getting ready to sleep. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and the noise from the doorbell slicing through the quiet of her apartment. She froze, her mind racing. Who would come to my door at this hour? As she tried to shake off the initial shock, but then the bell rang again, followed by a knock, and then another, and another. Each knock felt louder and more insistent than the last, as if whoever was on the other side was growing more impatient. Aiko held her breath. She said that she froze in place and felt a shiver run right through her. She didn't dare move, but then something made her blood run cold. The narrow mail slot in her door suddenly opened, and she said that she could feel a presence on the other side, lurking and watching. And then a voice, a man's voice, low and rough, maybe in his 40s or 50s. I know you're in there. I saw the lights on. Just open up, will ya? Aiko's stomach twisted. She didn't recognize the voice. It was no one that she knew. Her head was filled with panicked questions like, why was he here? And how did he know that I was home? Did he also know that I was alone? Her heart pounded as she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Who are you? The man ignored her question, his tone shifting from coaxing to impatient. Come on, let me in. Just open the door. He insisted. It was as if he couldn't understand why that she hadn't already done as he asked, as if he had every right to be there. That's when Aiko's brain got into gear and she reached for her phone. She grabbed it, dialing the police and making sure her voice was loud enough for him to hear. I'm calling the police right now, she said, her voice trembling but firm. The moment the stranger on the other side of the door heard the word police, the man went silent. After a tense few seconds, Aiko heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway. She stayed on the line, her heart still racing, until an officer arrived to take her statement. The police assured her that they would increase patrols around her building and advised her to keep her doors tightly locked. Aiko thought that was the end of it, but the encounter left her shaken. She tried to push it to the back of her mind, telling herself that it was just a creepy one-time incident, but that feeling of being watched lingered. Aiko worked as an aromatherapy masseuse in a small cozy salon nearby. A few days later, a new client came in, a man in a business suit who looked like an ordinary office worker. But something about him felt off though, and she couldn't shake the sense that she'd seen him somewhere before. Was he referred by one of her regulars? She wondered. After the session, the man smiled at her, his eyes lingering a bit too long. I'm sorry about the other night. he said casually, as if they were discussing the weather. Aiko felt her heart skip a beat. "Excuse me?" she stammered, trying to keep her expression neutral. The man's smile widened and he looked her directly in the eye. "You're really beautiful. I happened to see you around and I got curious. So I did a little digging, found out where you live, where you work. I didn't mean to be so forward the other night, but, well, I'd had a few drinks." He said it all with a strange, almost friendly smile, as if his actions were nothing out of the ordinary. Aiko felt a wave of nausea. He didn't seem embarrassed or remorseful. In fact, he almost looked proud. Aiko took a step back, trying to keep her composure. But inside her mind was racing. She knew she couldn't go back to her apartment after this. That night, she packed a bag and then went to stay with her boyfriend, never setting foot in her own place again. Eventually, she left the job too, since she couldn't bear the thought of running into him again. As Aiko told me her story, she shivered, pulling her arms around herself as if to ward off a chill. "People like that, they have no clue that what they're doing is wrong," she said, her voice barely a whisper. And I can't imagine how scary that must have been for her. I'm 22 years old now, and we used to have a neighbor who was around 60 to 70 years old. He died a few years ago. When he was still alive, he would cause us so much trouble. He scratched our car, poisoned our apple trees and grass, blew up a firework near me to cause me to temporarily go deaf on one ear when I was 4, and just all kinds of things. His son was a judge in our city, so pretty much everything we took to court was against us. I remember Dad often called us from work to tell us not to be alone at home and that we should have to stay at Grandma's. When I was little, I think around 6 to 7, I would frequently have nightmares about seeing a face outside of the bathroom window. The window is above our bathtub. It's high enough that no one can actually see in unless they climb the roof of our shed, which is underneath the bathroom window in our garden. Coincidentally, the shed is directly next to a fence that separates our garden from the neighbor's one. I still remember the dreams. I remember having them pretty much every other night. I never told my parents when I was little because we never really talked about anything. So, I didn't really share anything that was happening to me. Well, I grew up thinking that they were just dreams and that was it. I did mention them to my therapist last year because we were discussing some personal problems, and I felt like this was kinda connected. And after coming home, Mom asked me what I talked about with my therapist, so I finally shared that I used to have such dreams. I never really thought about them being real, But she told me that I actually did tell her that I saw our neighbor on our shed's roof. I don't remember telling her that, but she said that I did mention it several times, and even my friends told her that they saw him there when they came over to our house and it creeped them out. Apparently, I never mentioned him watching me shower. But after she told me that, it really clicked for me, and it was as if I suddenly remembered that. I do think that it was him. It would make sense, and the fact that it happened still creeps me out. There was another incident that creeped me out too. It happened when I was around 9 to 10. I went to the balcony in the evening, and the balcony door was in my room, and I often went there to call my cat home in the evening. But this time, I saw a person standing in the middle of our garden. It was already dark out and I couldn't really tell who it was. I waited for a little bit to see what the person does, but I didn't really see them move. It was as if he was just standing and staring in front of him. I called out, "Dad?" Because obviously, I expected it to be him. even though I found it odd. But the person looked up at me, and even though it was dark, I could tell that it was someone else. I think it was partly because my eyes just adjusted to the dark and I could make out the silhouette of the person better. I went to tell my dad, who was downstairs, but when he looked, there was no one there. When I went back upstairs to my room and I went to the balcony again, I noticed my neighbor's back door closing just when I looked there. I don't remember if it was directly the next day or a few days later, but our grass turned brown and we found that it was poisoned, most of the grass being out of reach from his property. This event just popped up in my memories from 2 years ago today, and I thought that it would be worth sharing here. It's definitely one of the scariest encounters that I have ever had, and definitely taught me to trust my gut. September 4th, 2022, I was at home waiting on my boyfriend to get home. It was getting late and I was impatient, so I decided to go out to get snacks from the gas station by myself. We live in a city that really isn't the best place for a then 22-year-old woman to be out alone at night. It's normal to hear gunshots, see cars get stolen, and there have been armed robberies at both of the gas stations by my house since I've lived there. Nevertheless, I was hungry, wanted some snacks, so off into the night I went for them. On my way to the gas station, my boyfriend passed me headed home on his bike when I was nearly there, which is a detail that is crucial to how things would play out. It was sometime around or shortly after 11 p.m. that I made it to the 7-Eleven and I pulled in by a pump. And before I even had a chance to take my keys out of the ignition, a woman who was standing at my passenger side door tried to talk to me through it. Another long story short, before this had happened, my best friend and I had a couple attempt to carjack us in another city. And ever since then, I have always locked my doors the second that I get in my car, and I had done just that this night. I stayed in my car. I told her that I couldn't hear her, so she walked to my side of the car. She said something along the lines of her ride not being able to pick her up because their car broke down and that she needed a ride while holding up texts on her phone. I told her, "I'm really sorry, I don't help people at night." And I immediately drove away. I was annoyed that I didn't get my snacks, but I just wrote it off. Just before arriving at my house, I take a left turn, and then I start down a curving road with a shopping center in the right. The first light on this stretch of road leads to my neighborhood where I make another left in. When I took my first left and approached the entrance to the shopping center, a car swerved out in front of me and then stayed on the center line the entire way to the light. I kept my distance and I pulled in behind them into the turning lane of my neighborhood. When we made the turn, they stopped next to the curb on the right side of the entrance. And this put me on very high alert and I passed them quickly. I am going to try my best to describe the shape of the area of my neighborhood that this took place in for context. When you pull into the neighborhood, there is a long straight road that has a left-hand turn shortly after the entrance, and then a right-hand turn further down. Both entrances connect into a loop going around the entire neighborhood, and the straight road that we were on is the main road in and out that connects them. I passed them on the main road and I drove down to the second turn to head to my house. When I passed, they started to drive as well and then followed me at a distance. Other people pull in behind me all the time, but this just felt different. I passed my parking spot, but I took note that my boyfriend was home, making my way through the loop that would lead to the other entrance. For a split second, I almost thought that I was overreacting, and I turned around, but as we made our way down the road, I knew that I wasn't. As I drove slowly through the loop over the speed bumps to prevent speeding, they got closer and closer to me. Over the last few, they were so close that I couldn't see the front of their vehicle. And after the last bump, there is a small turn with a dumpster, and then a straight to the main road. When we hit this curve, a man was walking to the dumpster and they backed off significantly. I took this as my chance and I took off away from them. I turned left back towards my house on the main road while yelling at Siri to call my boyfriend. I told him, "Come outside," and I floored it down the main road, blaring my horn the whole way. The car gunned it after me, and I prayed that my boyfriend would be outside in time. I quickly pulled into my spot, still honking, and the car skidded to a stop behind my car at the angle so that I couldn't back out shortly after I parked. Two grown men immediately jumped out of the car while I stayed in mine, horrified. They quickly started to approach my doors until they saw that someone was waiting for them. My boyfriend told them that they needed to get back in their car and then to leave and to not make a single move near me again. They tried to argue, saying that I follow them and some other nonsense that I honestly couldn't understand over my sheer panic and my adrenaline rush. My boyfriend was ready to stand his ground and do whatever he had to protect me, and he conveyed that. The men eventually left, and I took my time getting out of the car, still in complete shock. The police were called, and they showed up nearly 2 hours later, saying that they didn't see the car in the area. I wonder why. They never looked any further into it. And needless to say, my boyfriend was with me every night and would even meet me at the entrance of the neighborhood after work to ride me home for some time after. I often think about what those men would have done if I had turned around or not even thought twice and pulled in my space to begin with. Would they have followed me all the way to the police station if my boyfriend wasn't home? Or was that woman a part of it? The whole thing just makes me nauseous. I had a feeling for a couple of weeks before this happened to keep an extra eye out on cars behind me to make sure that I wasn't being followed. It's a crazy thing to look back on now. It's very scary to think about how things could have ended if I had let that woman in my car or didn't have someone to scare them off. So to the woman who approached my car and possibly set me up, get wrecked. And to the men who followed me home and intended to do God knows what to me, let's definitely never, ever meet again. I'm an 18-year-old female and I live with my parents on their farm. We have a relatively big house with a nice back patio, and we got a hot tub a while back, which my parents used a lot and I sometimes joined them. Since I have my own car, my parents have gotten more comfortable with leaving me at the house when they leave for extended periods of time. The longest they've been gone is almost a week, and they kept in contact with me the entire time. I just take care of our animals and chill out when I'm not working, and I have gotten so used to being alone. My parents were both raised in farming/ranching families, but I was a city kid until they bought a farm and then moved us out here. I'm used to it now, but it took quite a bit of acclimating considering that I lived in our previous house for 13 years and I knew the city like the back of my hand. You could have placed me anywhere and I'd be able to find my way back home one way or another. It's been a few years though, and I consider myself well adjusted. Obviously, there's pros and cons, but I'm at peace where we are now. One thing that took a lot of getting used to was how much space we have. In my old house, my bedroom window lined up with my next door neighbor's kitchen window, and so my curtains were drawn shut 95% of the time. And now, with my bedroom being on the second floor and our neighbors being 100 or so yards away, I can get change with the window open and not worry about being seen. I mention this because it's unusual to have anyone walk past our driveway nowadays, as opposed to the city where it was weird when people didn't pass by. Anyway, this took place a few weeks ago, and my parents had gone to a distant cousin's wedding, so they left me at the house to look over at the farm. I was fine with this, as I didn't really know the said cousin very well, but I sent my well wishes with my parents. We sent constant updates back and forth for a few days that they were gone. Earlier, I mentioned that we had a hot tub on our back patio. I believe it was the second or third night, and I had gotten home from work absolutely exhausted. I decided to relax in the hot tub for a bit to just soothe my sore muscles before going to bed. I'm a bit of a night owl, so by the time that I have taken a nap and had dinner, it was around 11 p.m., and the sun had pretty much set. Another one of my favorite things about living on a farm is the lack of light pollution. I can look up and easily see the stars above me. I've always been into astrology/astronomy, and I love stargazing. And that was part of the reason that I waited so long before going out to the hot tub. I went out and got myself settled, and I just sat in the hot water, enjoying the stars and the heat, and occasionally sipping my drink that I brought out with me. It was still light enough that I could see the edge of our property, but dark enough that I could see the stars relatively well. I had probably only been out there for 10 minutes when I suddenly got a chill down my spine, and it wasn't from the breeze on my heated skin. I felt like I was being watched. Immediately, I snapped out of my daze and I turned to where I felt the feeling was coming from. It took my eyes a bit to adjust. I'm nearsighted, but I wasn't wearing my glasses outside. And when my eyes adjusted, I felt my stomach drop at what I saw. From the patio, looking straight ahead, you could see our barn, which has some fences connected to it that make up a couple of pens. Our older horses are in the largest pen to the right of the barn, and behind that pen is a large field that stretches to a row of saplings. Behind those saplings is a barbed wire fence, which indicates the end of our property. To the left of the barn is a patch of trees that lead into the forest that surrounds our property, though there's a few divots here and there where we have set up some other farm things like a garden and a chicken coop. And while I couldn't see directly behind the barn, I could see beyond it, into the field behind the pens, which is where I spotted what I figured caused my feeling of unease. A few feet out of the forest, standing between two of the saplings at the edge of our field, was a figure of what I assume was a person, just standing there in the darkness. I immediately knew that that was where the feeling was coming from. I stood up in the hot tub and I turned to face the person. For a few moments, I just stood there looking at them. I don't know if they saw me, but when they did, they didn't move after me staring at them for a solid minute. I decided enough was enough, and I got out of the tub. I closed everything up as quickly as I could while trying not to look panicked, and then I went inside, where I immediately turned all the lights on, shut all the windows, and locked the doors. My dogs had been inside the whole time, none the wiser to the trespasser, and I figured that it would be best if I didn't alert them to what was going on in case it turned out to be nothing, even though I was pretty sure that I was right about what I'd seen. I debated on calling the police, but I lived 20 minutes from the nearest town, so by the time that they got there, the person would likely be gone. Besides, it was midnight at this point, and I didn't want to wake any of my neighbors with the commotion authorities may bring. I resolved to just sit in the living room with my dogs and keep an eye on the person from inside. Our living room has windows that face outside in the same direction as our back door to the patio does, so I could still see the same view from the tub, albeit a little more difficult with the lights on. But ever since I'd seen that figure, it was impossible to not notice them afterward. The thought crossed my mind to grab my stepdad's rifle from the basement, but I had no idea where he stored it, or even how to use it, so it was likely not a wise idea, especially because going to get it would mean that I would have to leave my post in the living room and then leave that person unsupervised. The more time passed, the more antsy I became. The person was just standing there not doing anything in the same position that I had spotted them in, and their apparent lack of motive was unnerving me like nothing else. I resolved that if they didn't leave within the next half an hour, I will call the police, because by that point, that person would have been standing there for about an hour trespassing on our property. More time passed, and I stayed in the living room with my phone in my hand and my dogs at my feet. I was looking at the window every few minutes to see if the figure was still there, which they were, and by now it was 12:15 in the morning and they still hadn't moved. Internally, I was thinking about who this person could possibly be and what reason they'd have to do this. We're a friendly community and we know pretty much all of our neighbors, though everyone mostly keeps to themselves. It was unlikely that anyone knew my parents weren't home and that I was alone. There were 2 vehicles parked in our driveway, mine and my mom's, as my parents had taken my stepdad's truck to travel in. And as far as I knew, we didn't have any issues with anyone, which made the scenario even more confusing and terrifying. It was 12:20 when things finally changed. As I was looking at the window for probably the 50th time that night, I saw the figure move. I froze, not moving a muscle, as I watched them turn and walk back to the way that I assumed that they had come, going to the left, which they disappeared behind the barn, presumably back into the forest. My relief was only temporary though, because while they were gone, they could still be very well on our property, just hiding out in the trees. The feeling of being watched was gone though, which made me feel a little bit better, though not by much. I decided to pull an all-nighter and stayed up until the sun rose and I passed out on the couch. I woke up at around 1 p.m. and I had a moment where I thought that I dreamt the whole thing. Just in case, after I finished my chores, I made my way across the field behind the animals' pens to our property line, and I walked from one end to the other to where the figure would have disappeared behind the barn to see if I could find anything out of the ordinary. It had been dry for the past week, so the grass and dirt didn't show any footprints or any sign that anyone had been there at all, which made me suspect that maybe I had just imagined the whole thing. I have a history of being paranoid because of my anxiety, and I have had multiple nervous breakdowns over things that turned out to be inconsequential. Still, I couldn't just forget about the feeling that I've gotten in the tub that night, the unmistakable feeling of having someone's eyes on me, and not being able to tell who. To this day, I have no idea who it could have been, and to be honest, I don't really want to know. Nothing like that has happened since, and I'm hoping that it stays that way. To the figure that stood at the edge of my parents' property and watched me in the hot tub in the middle of the night, let's not meet. My wife and I have always been big on drinking. We each like to hit our own favorite spots on the weekends, sometimes coming back separately in the early hours. And last weekend was no different. We each went to our own bars. She doesn't like my bar too much because it's a sports bar, and plus, she has plenty of friends at her favorite bar. Anyway, I got home first and around 1 a.m. I started to get sleepy, so I just went to bed without waiting for her. But not long after I drifted off, a loud knock on the front door pulled me right out of my sleep. I sat up, groggy but alert. I thought that it might be my wife, so I called through the door. "Is that you?" And I mentioned my wife's name. A woman's voice responded. It said, "Open up." Something about it didn't sit right with me. The tone, the way she said it, it felt off somehow. I frowned and I called again. "Who's there?" "Let me in," the voice drawled out, but it didn't sound any clearer. If anything, the voice was getting creepier. Now, let me explain something about our building. It's got a secure entrance, meaning anyone who doesn't live here can't just waltz in. Visitors have to get buzzed in by someone already inside, which means that if it wasn't my wife, this person shouldn't have been able to reach our front door at all. And to make matters stranger, there's no peephole in our door. So without the intercom camera, which they hadn't used, there was no way for me to see who was on the other side without opening it. Curiosity gave way to a rising sense of unease. Still, I tried one more time. "Hey." I then called out my wife's name and asked, "Is that really you?" I waited, tense. There was a pause and then the voice replied, "It's me." "It's me." A chill ran down my spine. Something about her tone was disturbingly flat. I took a breath, backed away from the door, and I returned to the bedroom. I grabbed my phone and I called my wife, hoping to get some clarity. When she picked up, I was instantly relieved. She was still out with a mutual friend at one of our usual bars. I quickly explained what was happening as I listened to the increasingly loud pounding coming from the front door. "Stay there," I told her. "Don't come back until I call you again." And she agreed, saying that she would crash at her friend's place, which put me at ease. At least she was safe, but I wasn't. The knocking was relentless, each bang louder than the last, each hit against the door jarring me to my core. Summoning all the courage that I could, I went back to the door and I yelled, "Go away! I'm calling the police!" The knocking stopped. For a few heart-pounding seconds, I stood there in silence, clutching my phone. Then, without warning, there was a powerful, deafening thud, a kick by the sound of it, slamming against the door so hard that the whole thing shook. And then, silence. Nothing. I held my breath, listening intently. But it was like they just vanished into thin air. I waited a few minutes trying to hear if they were still in the building, but it was dead quiet, not a single sound from any nearby doors or hallways. After about 5 minutes of strained silence, I decided that it was probably safe and went back to bed, though I was far too wired to sleep. Just as I started to relax, a faint noise echoed from above me. Small but unmistakable. It was a series of soft knocks, matching the exact rhythm that I had heard earlier. It was coming from the ceiling directly above the bedroom. This didn't make any sense. We live on the top floor. There is roof access, but to get up there, you would bring a ladder. There's absolutely no way anyone should be up there in the middle of the night. And yet the knocking continued. Soft but insistent, as if someone was standing right above me, mimicking the same creepy rhythm from earlier. And I lay there, my heart racing, staring up at the ceiling, paralyzed by fear and also at points wrestling with my sanity. I had to keep asking myself if this was really happening or not. I mean, I guess I could have been hearing things, but I really don't think I was. Then, just as abruptly as it started, the sound stopped and silence fell heavy and suffocating. After a few minutes, I shakily picked up my phone and called my wife again. I told her everything that had happened and made her promise not to come home until morning. She promised and agreed to stay over at her friend's house, and I felt some relief knowing she wouldn't be in danger. But I was still trapped here. I thought about going out myself, maybe grabbing a late night drink to calm my nerves. But the idea of walking out of my front door from the safety of my place made my skin crawl. I couldn't bring myself to open it, not after everything that had happened. In the morning, once the sun was up and things felt somewhat safer, I contacted the building's management and asked if they could check the security footage. I also let them know that I wanted to file a report about a possible intruder. We agreed that they would review the footage and let me know if they found anything. I hoped maybe that they would see the person on camera, something that could explain what had happened to me. But they never found any evidence of anyone entering or leaving our building that night. No one. That was 2 weeks ago, and I still can't shake the feeling that someone or something was right there, just on the other side of that door, trying to get in. I'll be honest, we're thinking of moving. The lease is up in July, and I don't think that I can spend another night in that apartment. I plan to bring this whole incident up with the management, but in the back of my mind, I don't expect them to believe me. I really don't want whatever was out there to come back. I will never forget the time where I almost lost my life in 2022. It was in the month of September, and I lived in Onalaska, Wisconsin. I was also a sophomore in high school. I met this 17-year-old man named Austin at my summer job. He used to go to the same high school as me, but he got expelled for plagiarism. He would pick me up and drop me off at my home every day of the summer when we had work because I didn't have a driver's license at that time. I also want to point out that it was pretty obvious that he had a crush on me because he would hug me every day, but I made it look like he didn't know that I knew that he liked me, and it worked. I just didn't feel the same way like he did. We were now into like the second or third week of school, and I was still settling in because I still had summer blues. It was the end of the night, and me and Austin were driving home from a party that a kid from school threw. Austin now just pulled up at my house to drop me off. But before I could step out of the vehicle, Austin hesitantly asked if I wanted to go out with him. I laughed, and I told him that I was okay, and I just wanted to be friends. He then said all right with a frown on his face. We then waved and said bye to each other. I then went inside my house and I took off my shoes. I changed into my pajamas, brushed my teeth, and I was ready to go to bed. Before I could even go to bed, I got a text from a friend. I unlocked my phone, and what I read on my screen will forever haunt me in my dreams. It was a long paragraph about how Austin had been secretly taking photos of me while I was sleeping in my bed through my window. I would sometimes leave the shades to my window open because no moonlight or streetlights ever came through my window. I also saw the photos of me sleeping. The reason how my friend found out is that because Austin bragged to her about this through text. He also had a photo album of it that was labeled, "The Love of My Life." Right there and then, I felt like a needle was going through my heart, realizing his obsession with me. I sent him a text in all caps telling him to never contact me again. He then said that he was sorry, he was playing the victim card. I felt like screaming after reading his text. I then sent him another text saying to him that he needed to lose my number. And the next you know, I blocked him. I wasn't feeling tired now, so I went to go take some melatonin and Benadryl so that I could fall asleep quicker. And it worked, but not for long. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up to the sound of my window shattering. I couldn't react quickly, and right in front of me, there he was. Austin. Before I could see what was in his hand, I felt my face being stabbed with a knife. I started to cry and scream, and about 5 seconds later, I heard my dad scream out in the hallway. "What the hell is going on?" And that's when Austin managed to escape through the broken window. Next, my father came storming in my room, and he had a look of terror on his face. He was feeling a mixture of sadness and anger, and he started hugging me and asking if I was all right and what had just happened. I was honest with him, and I told him that I wasn't fine or safe, and that boy Austin broke through my window and started attacking me with a knife. Now my father's emotion turned to 100% anger, and he ran out of the house chasing down Austin, but he wasn't able to find him. I called the police and told them my story, and they said that they would be there ASAP. They arrived in 10 minutes later along with the medics. I was now feeling very dizzy, with blood all over my face. My father gave me some water and a towel to wrap around my body. I was able to tell them my side of the story, and I was then taken to the hospital in the ambulance, while the police would try to locate where Austin was. I was treated for my stab wounds, and I stayed overnight at the hospital, and I was able to go home the next day. It took the cops a little while to find him, but they eventually found him. I was given information that when Austin was at the hospital, he stated that he was going to prison for a long time. He admitted that he didn't know why he did it, and he expressed that he loved me. As a result, Austin was charged with felony counts with attempted first-degree intentional homicide, armed burglary, and was subsequently given a cash bond at $50,000. A year later, he was guilty from the first charge, but the second charge was dismissed. Ultimately, Austin was sentenced to 16 years in Wisconsin State Prison and 4 years of extended supervision. Although justice had been served, I still get very skittish whenever I meet another man because I'm afraid of what his real intentions are. I know I sound crazy, but I still have a lot of PTSD from it, and I wish nothing but pity on Austin, and I hope that he goes to hell when he dies. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.